Hello! Today I'm in the ancient and historic town of Malmesbury, one of the key towns along the route of the North Wessex Way. In this video I'm going to follow the route of the road through the town. I'm going to talk to you about some of the history of the town as it relates to the road, and I'm going to explore why Malmesbury had a bypass to the south of the town way before it had the current bypass. So come with me on a journey through the ancient town of Malmesbury. Before we start our walk through the town, let's look at where Malmesbury sits on the North Wessex Way. According to John Ogilvy's map, Malmesbury is 42 miles from Oxford and 26 miles from Bristol. It was one of the key towns along the route of the North Wessex Way. If you'd like to learn more about the history of the route, please watch my previous video. Malmesbury is marked on Robert Morden's map of 1695, which shows the North Wessex Way running through the town from east to west, the only road shown in North Wiltshire other than the Fosse Way. John Ogilvy's map of 1675 shows in detail the route of the road through the town of Malmesbury, and this is the route we'll be following in this video. The earliest map of Great Britain, the Gough map from 1400, shows Malmesbury illustrated by a church with a spire. More on that later in the video. And you can see a red line running through the town, marking the North Wessex Way. On our walk through the town, we will start on the east side at Blix Hill, walk up Holloway and into Oxford Street, look at the Market Cross and the Abbey before heading out down Abbey Row and Bristol Street and out over the bridge on the Foxley Road, heading west. So settle down and come with me on a walk through history. So this is the North Wessex Way. I'm looking towards Milbourne here, and the original North Wessex Way was cut in half in 1971 by the Malmesbury bypass. As you can see today, that's a really busy road. So that's meant that the original road into Malmesbury on the North Wessex Way was basically forgotten and fell into disuse, and it's hardly used at all now. Not only that, but if you go back to 1755, when the Acton Turville to Farringdon Turnpike came into being, this road was also bypassed, and the Turnpike Road went slightly to the north of here. So really from about 1750 onwards, this road that we're looking at now fell into gradual disuse. So what we're seeing today is a relic of the past. So this is Blix Hill, the original route into Malmesbury on the North Wessex Way. So as we walk along, I'll talk to you a little bit about the history of Malmesbury. So Malmesbury dates right back to the Iron Age. It was an Iron Age hill fort, and it came to prominence really in the Anglo-Saxon period with the founding of the Abbey. It was the burial place of King Athelstan, the first King of England, and it's got a claim through King Athelstan of being the first capital city of England. Let's have a think, what else can we talk about? So in 880, it was granted a royal charter as a borough. And then in King Alfred's period, it became a burgh, a fortified town. So we're just starting to walk down Blix Hill now. As you can see, for a main road, this is pretty narrow. It's what would be called a holloway, and indeed the road further on is called Holloway. That's the ancient English word for a hollow way or a sunken road. And it really just winds its way down the hill here. So I'm going to be quiet now, and we're just going to walk a little bit faster and give you a sense of what this road is really like. So here we meet the road that would have gone to Cirencester, and we cross over the Tetbury branch of the River Avon. This is one of the two branches of the Avon that go round Malmesbury, and we'll talk about that in a bit more detail later. So these are the water meadows on the east of the town. What I want to show you is the wall that runs along the top of the hill on this side of the town. This is the town wall, an ancient protected monument now. It was originally built in the late 800s, early 900s by King Alfred, when he created the burhs around the south of England, the fortified towns, and Malmesbury was one of his burhs. The wall was then rebuilt in the early 1200s and fortified again during the English Civil War. But as you can see here, you can hear the river behind me, you've got the hill, you've got the wall. Malmesbury was an obvious defendable town, a hilltop town surrounded by water on all sides. And if you look at the LiDAR image of the town, you can see that the two branches of the Avon protected on all sides, except for the narrow strip which we now call Abbey Row on the east side of the town. So this is the LiDAR image of the town, generated using lasers, and it gives us a really good idea of the geography of the town without buildings or trees. You can see the two branches of the River Avon nearly surround the town on all sides, before merging on the southeast corner. The only strip of land connected to the hilltop is at the northwest corner, where Abbey Row is now found. So you can see why everyone since the Iron Age has viewed Malmesbury as a very defendable town, and with its royal connections back to King Athelstan, it's not for nothing that it's known as the Queen of Hilltop Towns. If you overlay the route of the North Wessex Way, you can see it crosses the Tetbury Avon before winding its way through the town and out over the Shurston Avon. At this point, I think it's important to introduce my production assistant on this shoot. Who clearly doesn't want to be introduced. Come on, Dodger. So this is Dodger, my production assistant on this shoot, who's clearly enjoying the shoot far too much. Hey Dodge, what have you got to say? So after crossing the River Avon, we then head up in towards the town. So at this point, this is where the east gate of the town was. This would be the gate that allowed you out towards Oxford and up towards Cirencester. Nothing remains of it now other than these tall stone walls. While we're walking up Holloway into the town, we should talk about the significance of the North Wessex Way to Malmesbury's history. To our modern way of thinking, Malmesbury sits on a north to south main road, the A429. The east-west route through the town is now the B4040, and that follows the route of the 1755 Turnpike Road that bypassed the North Wessex Way via Cricklade. This meant that by the middle of the 1800s, the original major route leading to and from Malmesbury fell into disuse after thousands of years of people travelling along it. So this really challenges the way we think about the history of Malmesbury, and it's the east to west route rather than the north to south route that has been significant in defining how the history of the town has evolved from the Iron Age onwards. If you'd been walking up this hill in a medieval period, you would have passed monks on their way to their lands at Purton, or onto Oxford where the Abbey owned Gloucester College, and you would have seen pilgrims arriving in the town to visit the Abbey. And here on the corner of Oxford Street, there's really a reminder of the town's religious background, and the Abbey is a sculpture called Monk in Meditation. This is Oxford Street in Malmesbury, getting its name from being on the route from Oxford to Bristol. And across the road here is the Tower House. Now the tower itself was built in the 1800s by an owner who was interested in astronomy, but it's what's through the double doors which is really interesting. That's behind those doors is a medieval banqueting hall. Now in the late 1540s, King Henry VIII made a surprise visit to Malmesbury, and that's where he was entertained by William Stump, who owned the house at the time. And then later on in the 1643, I think it was 1st of August 1643, Charles I was reputedly also entertained in the banqueting hall there. Unfortunately the doors are locked today, so we can't show you what's behind them, but if you ever get a chance to see inside, you'll see the remains of a medieval banqueting hall. So we'll carry on down Oxford Street. With all the traffic and the buses. Past the town hall on the left here. And the yellow building on the left, which is now Roost Restaurant, is the old Guildhall pub, one of the oldest pubs in Malmesbury. Now if you're visiting Malmesbury, no visit will be complete without a look at the Barn Owl bookshop. And there you can buy a copy of John Ogilby's strip map from 1675 of the route from Oxford to Bristol. So do call in and say hello there. We'll cross over. And you can see you come out at the junction of the Market Cross and the High Street. But there is a reminder of Oxford Street on the other side of the road. Sadly, looking slightly rusty and tarnished. Maybe the town council can do something about that. So here you have Malmesbury High Street. The Market Cross was built in the 1400s, and it was built to protect the market traders from the weather. But a very ornate piece of building which is central to Malmesbury.
From Wiltshire.
So here we are in front of Malmesbury Abbey, and the North Wessex Way goes round the edge of the churchyard here. And if you'll indulge me for a few minutes, I'm going to talk to you about some of the fascinating history of this abbey. It all starts in 637 when Maildub, an Irish monk, arrives in Malmesbury and establishes a monastic community. Maybe he came from Ireland, landed in Bristol, came up the North Wessex Way and decided this is where he was going to stay. He goes on to lend his name to Malmesbury, Maildubsbury, the town of Maildub. But was it always called that? Well, in 1533, John Leyland, who is an antiquarian, was researching documents in the Abbey. And he came across reference that the original name was Bladunum, maybe in Roman times. That's the Latin for blade. And then in the Saxon times, early Saxon times, it was known as Ingleburn. But today it's Malmesbury or Malmesbury. Then in 675, Oldhelm became the first abbot of the Abbey. He goes on to become Saint Oldhelm. And the Abbey grows in importance, both as a centre of religion, but also a centre of education. In 939, King Athelstan dies, and he was the first king of all England, and he was buried at Malmesbury Abbey. In the 1100s, there was a period of unrest called the Anarchy, a period of 20 years of turmoil. And this became about because Henry I's daughter, Empress Matilda, fought with King Stephen over the right to be sitting on the throne of England. In 1144, Malmesbury was besieged by Matilda's forces, and Stephen had to march his forces down from Oxford, down the North Wessex Way, to try and relieve the siege of Malmesbury. Then in 1153, Matilda's son, the Duke of Normandy, Henry the Duke of Normandy, decided that he would have a claim to the throne as well. So he was Henry I's grandson. He left France, landed in Poole and came straight here, captured the town and besieged the castle which would have been behind the Abbey here. His French troops rounded up the townsfolk and the monks into the Abbey and slaughtered them. So there was a massacre in the Abbey. Stephen marched his army again down from Oxford, but it was January, it was wet, the river was flooded, and the best he could do was to have a shouting match across the river at Henry's forces. Stephen eventually left and went back up to Oxford, and Henry left and went further up the north of England. 2 years later, Henry was crowned Henry II of England. Now in the 1200s, during the period of the abbot who was called William of Colerne, there was a big building works were undertaken with the Abbey. And the Abbey, as you see it today, started to take shape. But it was vastly bigger than you see today. It extended way out to the right, and it had a spire taller than Salisbury Cathedral. And during that works, they had to move the body of King Athelstan. They disinterred it, moved it to elsewhere, but the records of where that was have been lost, and to this day nobody knows where King Athelstan is now buried. In 1500 there was a storm and the spire came crashing down. It was never rebuilt, and 48 years later the dissolution of the monastery happened, and life at the Abbey, as it had been known for hundreds of years, came to an end. The remaining part of the Abbey was bought by William Stump, a local businessman, to use for his silk business, and eventually he gave it to the townsfolk as the parish church, and it remains as the parish church to this day. This is the east end of the Abbey, and you can see 3 of the 4 pillars that would have supported the spire back in the 1300s and 1400s. This was the choir part of the Abbey. The spire itself was taller than Salisbury Cathedral, and Salisbury Cathedral spire is 123 metres high, or 404 feet. So imagine this height on top of here. It would have been a truly impressive sight, visible for miles around. Today we can only imagine what that would have looked like. On the south side of the Abbey, you can see marks and holes made by musket balls and cannonballs left by the battle that took place on the 26th of March 1643, as the parliamentary forces tried to capture the town from the royal forces during the English Civil War. The south porch of the Abbey is well worth a look if you're visiting the town. It dates from the Norman era and so was built in the 1100s. On the outside, it features 3 concentric rings of carvings, each depicting different scenes from the Bible. As you go inside the porch, there are further carvings. the 12 apostles, 6 on either side of the porch, and a carving of Christ above the inner door. Given that these are over 900 years old, they're in remarkably good condition. And also in the Abbey grounds you can find the grave of Hannah Tynoe. She died in October the 23rd, 1703. In the bloom of life she's snatched from hence, she had not room to make defence, for tiger fierce took life away, and here she lies in a bed of clay until the resurrection day. So yes, she was killed by a tiger. The story goes that she tried to play with a tiger that was here as part of a circus, and it attacked her and killed her. Her gravestone has been recently renovated and is looking lovely today. It's an interesting piece of Malmesbury history. Possibly the only person killed by a tiger in Wiltshire. A word of thanks must go to Tony McAlevey, local historian in Malmesbury, who's written this amazing book about the history of Malmesbury Abbey. And it's been a real source of information and inspiration as I've researched this part of the story of the North Wessex Way. So thank you very much, Tony. And if you're in town, go to the Barn Owl bookshop and get your own copy of Malmesbury Abbey by Tony McAlevey. Right next to the Abbey is the Old Bell Hotel, claimed to be the oldest hotel in England. In 1220, Abbot Loring established a hostelry for visiting dignitaries, and that has remained as a hotel ever since then, over the centuries, right beside the North Wessex Way. So it would have seen dignitaries, pilgrims, travellers, business people, all visiting and staying as they travelled along the road. We're now on Abbey Row, and this is the site of the west gate for the town. And as we said when we look at the LiDAR map, this is the thin strip of land that is the only really attackable bit of the town. Everywhere else is protected by rivers or hills. And that's what happened on the 23rd of March 1643. Sir William Waller led the Parliamentary army and attacked the town, and the royal forces coming up Abbey Row with muskets and cannons to try and take the town from the royal forces. If you're coming to Malmesbury, make sure you make it as far as the Triangle. There are some lovely shops and eateries here. There's the Cozy Cone ice cream shop, which makes delicious ice cream, and as you can see, I couldn't resist. This is the recently refurbished Three Cups pub. They have a wonderful landlady, amazing staff, and they sell vegan food at lunchtimes and sometimes in the evenings. But it's become a great centre of social life in the middle of Malmesbury. And then further round you have Michael's, the butcher, that is also a bistro and serves the best full English breakfast you're likely to find anywhere this side of London. So make sure you visit the Triangle. You'll know you're here because of the War Memorial. And the old cars. So here we are on Bristol Street, leaving Malmesbury out towards the west on the North Wessex Way. So at this point on Bristol Street, the road goes off to the right here, following the B4040 towards Shurston. But up until 1755, this road didn't really exist. It was part of the turnpike that was created between Acton Turville and Farringdon. So the original route out of Malmesbury went off to the left here, on the Foxley Road, out over the River Avon to the south of the town. So we'll walk on down the road a bit here. And here we arrive at Truckle Bridge, as it's called. The bridge over the Shurston Avon that runs around the south of the town. Now on John Ogilvy's map of 1675, this was marked as a wooden bridge. So at some stage since 1675, it was turned into a stone bridge. And here you have the River Avon running off from Shurston towards Malmesbury. And so the North Wessex Way leaves Malmesbury, heading off towards Foxley and Luckington on its way to Bristol. So that concludes our trip through Malmesbury along the North Wessex Way. I hope you've enjoyed uncovering some of the history that we've talked about and learning more about the amazing abbey that's on the hill behind me. But at the start of this video, I mentioned that there's a bypass around Malmesbury that predates the current 1971 bypass. So let's see if we can go and find out more about that. Come with me. There is good evidence that in Malmesbury's past there has been a route to the south of the town that allowed traffic on the North Wessex Way to bypass the town. On this map, the North Wessex Way is marked in red, and the green route shows the footpaths and bridleways that once would have made up this bypass. Coming from Milbourne to the east of the town, there are a couple of routes that lead down to the town bridge over the Shurston Avon. You then follow the road and bridleways past Arches Farm and Thornhill Farm before crossing Common Road and taking the byway that emerges on the Foxley Road on the west of the town. So I'm back on the east side of Malmesbury, just off Blix Hill where the North Wessex Way comes into the town. Now if you've been a drover with a flock of sheep or a herd of cows or an ox cart driver, the last thing you'd want to do is to go up the hill into the town, find your way through the narrow streets and then down the hill on the far side. The far easier way would be to bypass the town. And I think this old bridge is evidence of an old bypass. You'd have come off Blix Hill, come down the slope, over this bridge into the water meadows that would take you round the edge of the town on the outside of the town walls. So after crossing the small bridge at the bottom of Blix Hill, the bypass would have come across these water meadows, round the edge of the town, crossing the Avon again before heading off towards the town bridge on the other branch of the Avon, the Shurston Avon. The bypass would have continued round the edge of the town walls and then crossed the Shurston branch of the River Avon using the town bridge before heading out towards the south. So once you cross the town bridge, you head out of the town and swing round to the right, and the bypass then takes you up Arches Lane towards Arches Farm and on towards the west. As you come along this part of the bypass, you get an amazing view back towards the Abbey and the town of Malmesbury. Imagine you were a traveller in the 1300s or the 1400s and seeing this for the first time. It would have been awe-inspiring. The Abbey would have been twice the size it is today, and it would have a spire taller than that of Salisbury Cathedral. And it would have been a real statement of monastic and church power in the area. So the western end of the Malmesbury bypass comes down this track and comes out on Common Road. And then we head down Common Road for a short distance. It's very quiet and peaceful at this part of Malmesbury. Isn't it, Dodger? until we reach this little byway on the right hand side. And the bypass continues on down there until it reaches the Foxley Road. And the Foxley Road, as we all know, is the North Wessex Way. So you can then continue on west towards Bristol. And that way you've bypassed going up the hill into Malmesbury, through all the narrow lanes and streets, down the hill the other side. You've had a nice journey with a great view of the Abbey, and you can get on your way without any more hassles. And that, I believe, is Malmesbury's first bypass. So that's it. That's the North Wessex Way as it goes through Malmesbury. I hope you've enjoyed the fascinating history that we've uncovered. And if you'd like to find out more, then come to my website, www.northwessexway.co.uk, and there's a lot more stories and information about the whole length of the route of the North Wessex Way from Oxford to Bristol. Likewise, if you're watching this on YouTube, click the subscribe button because there'll be more videos to follow in future. So thank you very much for your time. See you again soon.